afternoon. Wow, okay, good afternoon, everybody. What a great turnout. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming here. So my name is Louis Martin Vega, Dean of our College of Engineering, and this is a very, very special moment and event for us. It's great to have you all here. Last year, this was a virtual event. And as all of us are doing, we're kind of walking back gradually into what we hope will be more normal circumstances, but I'm just really delighted to see the turnout here for Michael. So let me just welcome everybody here, faculty members and staff and students, friends and visitors. Welcome to the 37th R.J. Reynolds Company Award Ceremony and Lecture. I'd like to start by recognizing Dr. Cindy Simon. Cindy, you're here, I believe, right? Cindy is the head of our Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering, the home department of this year's award winner. And I'd also like to recognize the previous recipients of this award, and thank you for your contributions to the college and the university. So we have a number of previous recipients here. Would all of you please stand up, those who are previous recipients of this award? Not just the ones that are going to get checks. Anybody else, right? Some of you will come up again, right? I promise you. The R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company Award for Excellence in Teaching, Research, and Extension was established in the College of Engineering to honor a member of the engineering faculty who has demonstrated superiority in several areas of activity that relate to the university's threefold mission of teaching, research, and extension. This annual award is supported by the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company through the NC State Engineering Foundation, again, to bring recognition to scientific and educational achievements in the fields of engineering. A committee of engineering faculty members representing academic, research, and extension areas, as well as representatives from other university colleges, review the nominations and then recommend a candidate. And the following criteria are used in the selection of the candidate: contributions to education, scholarly activities, and extension and public service activities. And then the award recipient is asked to prepare a lecture on a topic related to engineering, which is the lecture that we'll hear today. Now, this is a $25,000 award, and it's given in increments of $5,000 over a 5-year period. But more importantly, it's the most prestigious award that the College of Engineering presents to an individual faculty member. So what I'm going to do now is present the annual checks to previous awardees. So let me start with Dr. Jacob Jones, who's now the Kobe Distinguished Professor in Material Science and Engineering. This is Jacob's second year, right? John, if you can pass the check over to Jacob. Dr. Jan Genzer, Frank and Doris Culverson Distinguished Professor in Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering for year 3. Jan? Dr. Richard Kim, Jimmy Clark Distinguished University Professor in Civil Construction Environmental Engineering for year 4. And Dr. Orlin Vela, Frank and Doris Culverson Distinguished Professor in Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering for year 5. At this time, I'm very pleased. I'm delighted to recognize this year's recipient, Dr. Michael Dickey. Dr. Dickey, Michael is the Camille and Henry Dreyfus Professor in the Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering, and he came to NC State or arrived here in 2008. As a professor, he is well known for his dedication to student recruitment and advising, as well as all of his research initiatives. Michael received the Outstanding Teaching Award, which is a reflection of his exceptional teaching evaluations. Students report that he expresses genuine concern for their success, both in his classroom and in their professional lives. by providing additional help, always with networking and job searching. In addition to teaching, he involves undergraduates in his laboratory, and I can say it goes well beyond undergraduates, K through 12 students as well, where he also mentors graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. Michael founded the Future Leaders in Chemical Engineering Symposium, at which the best undergraduate research in the country is presented. He also serves the university community at large. He's been a member of numerous committees that includes the Provost Holiday Medal Committee, the NNF Advisory Board, and the Undergraduate Research Advisory Board. He served the college in many ways, participating in teaching peer reviews, judging student presentations, and recruiting for the graduate school. In research, Michael has collaborated with 30 different faculty members at NC State. And over the last 3 years, he's published or submitted more than 100 peer-reviewed papers. His most significant contribution is his work on liquid metals based on gallium. He is an international expert in this field, and he's been invited to speak at numerous universities around the world and also TEDx presentations. And this is in addition to being featured in prominent publications such as Physics Today and Advanced Materials. What's not in the script that I'll share with you, but I think it may be in the program, is if you go on YouTube, you will also find Dr. Dickey, right? And maybe he'll share a little bit of that as we go forward. Since 2018, he's received the Distinguished Leadership and Contributions to Scientific Research Award from Sigma Chi, the American Chemical Society Distinguished Speaker of the Year from the North Carolina chapter, and in recognition of his commitment to fostering undergraduate research, he received the eponymous Outstanding Research Mentor Award. For those of you like me that had no idea what the word eponymous means or meant, I understand that the real name of that award is the Michael Dickey Outstanding Research Mentor Award because it was named after him. And he received, obviously, the inaugural award in 2020. He also has been selected to the Event Science Study Group. Michael, let me offer our sincere congratulations on this very well-deserved honor. And if you'll come forward to John, we will present you with your check, and I believe I should have, Tracy, if John has a framed certificate as well, okay? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Michael. We're very proud to have him present his lecture. I have here, Michael, Beyond the Terminator, right? Liquid metals, stretchable electronics, and shape-changing materials. Michael, it's all yours. Congratulations.
I'm not sure who that person is that Louis just described, but thank you. That was very touching. It's such an honor to be standing here to receive this recognition. When Louis gave the former recipients of the award a chance to stand up, the people that stood up are some of my heroes and role models and mentors that I've looked up to for a long time, every single one of them. And so it's really an honor to be included in that group, and I'm just pinching myself. I'm also really thankful that you all are here. This is really special to me, and I really appreciate it. I also recognize that we have many excellent faculty in the College of Engineering, and many of them deserve to be standing up here, and so I'm looking forward to seeing them maybe next year or the year after, because they're equally deserving. So I'm just happy to be up here and representing everybody. Well, the title of this is meant to be compelling, and I hope that it helped get you here, but there's a lot of things that I need to say before we start talking about liquid metal. And the first is that this award sort of encompasses a lot of things, and clearly I couldn't do this by myself. There's so many people to thank: students, collaborators, mentors, staff, friends, and family, and of course those that nominated me. So Peter Fedke is here, and I really appreciate him kind of leading the charge there. And I think there's some people that are online as well that are overseas that have joined us. But the people that really deserve the lion's share of the credit for what you're going to see today and for this award are students. And I don't have enough, well, I do have time, but I won't read all their names, but just show you some snapshots of students over the years. And this is one of the best parts of my job, is I get to work with amazing young people. So this is pictures from our research group, which comprises grad students and postdocs and undergrads over the years. So thank you to them, and this is really a shared award. I'll cut up the check into small pieces and give it to you all. One of the things that I really like to do and that I've embraced at NC State is working with other faculty. And I mentioned that we have excellent faculty, and I'm sincere when I say that. This is a snapshot of people that I've published papers with, and they cover, I think, 3 different colleges, multiple different departments, and it's been a joy to work with you all, and I also, you all, a great deal of thanks, and several of you are in the audience, so thank you for being here. My foundation is my family. You know, you can choose your collaborators, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family, and I happened to win the jackpot there. My parents are here, and my wife and kids, and this is a picture of my sister and her family. So I'm thankful to them for being here and for being so supportive. In particular, my wife, Kim, deserves a big shout out because, and I don't want to embarrass her, but this job is not a 9-to-5 job. Those of you that are kind of in this space, you know this. It's really an all-encompassing job. I travel a lot, and my family has been very supportive, and I think they still love me, even though this job does take a lot of my time. So thank you to them very much for being here. Well, I looked up a little bit about the R.J. Reynolds, and of course I'm thankful to the Reynolds family for this opportunity and this award. This is the only picture I could find of R.J. Reynolds. He was born in Virginia and shortly thereafter moved down to Winston-Salem and was a big-time innovator in tobacco and became shortly thereafter the richest person in the state of North Carolina. And before he passed away, he handed over the reins of the company to his little brother named William Neal Reynolds. And I wanted to share with you that the Reynolds family has a very special place in my heart for a few reasons. For one is if you could kind of drill a hole through that wall, I believe, and walk outside, you would see Reynolds Coliseum. And that happens to be my favorite building on earth. It's nothing too spectacular from the outside, but inside it's a magical place, at least in my memory. This is where the Wolfpack play basketball. At least now it's the women's team, and from 1949 to 1999, the men's team played there. And my dad, who didn't grow up much of a sports fan, but knew that I was a sports fan, was very nice and took me to games growing up. So we had 2 tickets, and I revisited our section. This was section 15. Hopefully you think that this is a recent picture, but don't look too close. So the Reynolds family also has some special meaning to NC State beyond this award. So there's the most prestigious professorship at NC State. It's called the William Neal Reynolds Professorship, and I'll just show you an example of one. This is a William Neal Reynolds Distinguished Professor, and it's somebody that I happen to go way back with. In fact, all the way back to birth. This is my dad, and see if I can make my whole family blush. And my dad and my mom are both here. I don't know who that chubby kid is that she's holding, but he sure is cute. And that chubby kid grew up a little bit, and that's my sister. So really great family. My parents were great role models and continue to be great role models in both my personal and professional life. So thank you for that. They also inspired me a lot, but they really never pushed me very much. And just to give you proof of that, they actually waited until I was about 4 to encourage me to get my PhD. So that was greatly appreciated, and I'm sure this audience will further appreciate that. Although I'm not the best dresser, maybe today notwithstanding, they were very good about dressing me and being pretty consistent about it. So you can see there's a lot of red, red, and there's my cousin Elizabeth, who's in the back row, and my cousin David and their parents, my aunt and uncle. More red. I had to get that tattoo removed, and more red. So if you can now fast forward about 10 years, a lot of things happened, of course, but I was very lucky to grow up here in Raleigh, one of the best places to live in the whole country, and we're all very lucky to live here. I got to go to one of the best high schools in the country. I'm biased, but I'm pretty convinced of this. Enloe is a public school, and usually people don't talk about public schools being the best in the country. But this was a magnet school, and while I was there, I got to meet some lifelong friends, several of which were very nice and came here, and so that was one of the best things that came out of Enloe. But in terms of my professional development, I was very fortunate to have a teacher named Dr. Anderson, who passed away a few years ago, and she was my chemistry teacher. And yes, you did hear that right, Dr. Anderson. So my high school chemistry teacher at a public school had a PhD. Now, they didn't all have PhDs, but she was really exceptional and got me, I can either thank her or blame her for getting me interested in chemistry. But I also like math, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. There was a lot of different things that I thought about, but this is just a great example of the impact that teachers can have, on our lives. And so that was also kind of something that I have always remembered. Well, fast forward to summer of, I think that's 94. I think I got that right. And I did an enrichment program called Governor's School. It's one of the best things that our state does. It's a summer enrichment program for juniors and seniors. And we did a field trip to a building called MCNC, and that still is in the Research Triangle Park, and that stands for Microelectronics Center of North Carolina. And I was probably, 17, and I had no clue about anything, and maybe still don't. But one of the things I learned about inside of this building was about clean rooms. So you see this kind of yellow color is kind of typical of clean rooms. This is where computer chips and these kinds of things are made. And my mind was blown that chemical engineers could be involved with making state-of-the-art electronics. It's a chemical process. Electrical engineers design them and work with them, but chemical engineers make them. So I got really excited. And that kind of inspired a lot of what I've done in sort of my life. So I've made this quadrant just to illustrate a principle, which is the idea of patterning. And so we see patterns in nature, for example, a zebra, which is kind of large scale, all the way down to the eyes that you'd see on a fly, or structures that you find on leaves of plants and those kinds of things. But on the right-hand side of this are engineered structures, and these could be skyscrapers all the way down to computer chips. And of course, I'm mostly interested in things in the bottom right corner, which is basically using processes to make really small things like transistors that could go onto a computer chip. Well, that eventually, again, fast forward a few years, eventually led me to graduate school, where I was incredibly fortunate to work with another great mentor named Grant Wilson. I used to make the joke that the one of these two people with the higher IQ was my advisor, but these days you shouldn't make political jokes, so I won't make that joke. Thank you for laughing. Anyway, they're both great people. I've been corrected that President Bush was quite the intellect too. Anyway, Grant Wilson is on the left. You can see that he's making the hook 'em horns. I like to tease the people at Texas that that's a less evolved form of the wolf pack. And you see he's got a medal around his neck, and that's the National Medal of Technology. This is kind of the Nobel Prize of the United States, and he won it for developing the materials that can be used to pattern computer chips. And so every one of you that I assume has a cell phone is using his technology. So very impactful person and a really great human being. Well, the thing that I worked on while I was there was basically trying to do things without having to go into a clean room, because clean rooms are really expensive. It's very expensive to build. In fact, the Intel fabs these days cost as much as the GDP of some small country, so they're really expensive. And so what we did was to try to take a film. So this is looking at the side. So if you imagine like the paint that is on this wall, that's a film. And it's kind of boring, but we wanted to make it into some structures. And the way that we did it was by applying an electric field across a small gap, basically applying a voltage, and that causes the film to basically jump across that gap. And I've got a video that will show it. I hope this works. So you're looking top down through the electrode, and there's your film, and as soon as you apply the voltage, it's like popcorn. These little things jump across, and you don't have to do anything special. You just take the film and you apply an electric field to it. And so if you look at it with a microscope, it looks like these pictures kind of in the middle. And I worked on another project which was making really small structures, and there's no scale bar there, so my science friends in the audience are going to be mad at me. But these are hundreds of atoms wide, which is remarkable, really pushing the state of the art for patterning. All right, so now you need to fast forward a couple more years. I'm going to come back to my postdoc, but I arrived at NC State, and once again, the story continues where I had really great mentors. So on the left was my teaching mentor, Lisa Bullard, who, this is a teaching and research and outreach award, and so I trace a lot of my teaching back to some of the training from Lisa and some of my other colleagues. I'm really thankful for that. But I also had another colleague, who I now call my brother, brother from a different mother, who is here, and he's a recipient of this from 2 years ago, Jan Ginzer. And I mentioned him specifically because, we really hit it off, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, to be honest, when I got to NC State, but I knew I wanted to find at least one project to work with Jan. And so that shaped one of the first things I worked with. Now, what I didn't show here is I had a lot of other mentors along the way, some of whom are here. Hal was one of my mentors that's continues to mentor me. Bob Kelly was another person that was very kind of an informal mentor, and Jean-Luc Alazzi from a different department was very nice and mentored me. So I was very, very fortunate. All right, so how do I work with Jan, and what the heck should I do with my life? NC State has believed in me, but I don't quite know what to do. Well, I thought since Jan likes to work on polymer thin films, and I wanted to do something to save the world, decided to work on what's called polymer photovoltaics, basically solar cells, converts light into electricity. And we were not the first to think of this. Many, many people work on this. The idea is you basically take something that resembles paint, put it on a surface, and there you go. So it should be cheap, and you can put it on flexible substrates, and you could use it like wallpaper. So that all sounds really good. One of the problems with them, though, is that they don't absorb all the light. So the light comes in, and it bounces out. So we wanted to capture all of that light, and the way that we envisioned doing it was by making a surface that had some little waves on the surface. And the idea is, you can see on the left, let me see if I can get a laser pointer. Okay, so the idea is when the light comes in, instead of bouncing back out and leaving it, it would bounce and hit this kind of curvy surface and bounce and basically take a longer path, more circuitous. The problem is that we're doing this with something that resembles paint. And so what we wanted to do was basically build it like a sandwich. So you put the peanut butter down and the jelly and the bread, and you build it up layer by layer. And then at the very end, magic happens, something happens. You heat it, you put it in a microwave, something, and it will form these structures. So this ends up working, and I'm not going to show you the answer, but it worked, and the student that did it is here. There's Yang. But that led us kind of down to even a more interesting path, and that is, how do you convert 2D surfaces into 3D shapes? And of course, you can do this with your hands by just, say, folding origami paper. Everybody knows that, but we wanted to do it in a way that would be kind of manufacturable without using your hands. So what we ended up doing was taking a piece of dirt cheap plastic. This is polystyrene. It's the same polymer that's used in styrofoam cups, and patterning with ink, which you can see there's black ink, and we shine light, and it folds. You guys must have seen this, because usually people go, ooh. You can still do that. It makes me feel good. Ooh, ah. Okay, so anyway, that was Yang's work, and the basic principle of this is to take these sheets. They're actually commercially available, and the little dirty secret here is that they've been stretched. So it's not just like a styrofoam cup. They've been stretched, and they're kind of frozen in this state, and if you put them in an oven, they would shrink back. But rather than putting them in an oven, we instead pattern them with ink. So this is literally a picture of my computer monitor right here, and this is a picture of the printer from my office. There's nothing fancy here. And when you pattern that ink, it basically absorbs the light more efficiently than the rest of the sheet, and you can put the ink on the top or the bottom, and you can get it to fold up or get it to fold down. And at the time, we didn't realize it, but these are called, in the world of origami, mountain folds and valley folds. And this was like a big deal to like 5 people in the universe that really love origami. But it did, to be a little less modest, it did sort of kick off a really big field of people that were interested in how do you get materials to go from flat into 3D shapes. So, why plastic sheets? Well, you can, high throughput manufacturing, everybody has saran wrap in their home and plastic sheets. You can ship things flat. We do this all the time, like IKEA is the master of this. So you ship it flat and then you fold it. And also 2D patterning techniques exist kind of everywhere. So there's printing, like inkjet printing, or even the way computer chips are made, so high tech to low tech. And well, why would you do it? Well, you can, once you start making things 3D, that introduces function. So it could be furniture, packaging, 3-dimensional electronics, implantable devices that could go in your body small and then kind of unfurl. And to me, one of the most flattering things is some of the people that I really look up to at Harvard used our technology and cited us in a paper in Science. And what they did is they made these robots This is not our work, I want to emphasize, but they made these robots so that they built flat, because it's easy to build them flat, and then they have them basically hit the go button, they fold, and then they scurry away. So that's all very cool. Now, believe it or not, the best thing that came out of this was not necessarily the science. I would say that it was the outreach, and since this is an outreach award, I do want to at least mention it. So this is a picture of Yang, who's in the audience, and there's my brother, Jan, and if you look very carefully, do you see yourself, Emmy? There's my baby. So we took this over to Duke because we know Duke students need a lot of help. And, but it turned out a bunch of kids showed up, and the kids were very interested. And actually one of the fun things was, you can kind of see it right in the corner, but this guy started getting in a kind of a competition with his daughter. So we had people that were like 50 years old down to little kids all doing this thing. And other universities have caught on to this and started using it, so at Colorado and UMass Amherst and other places. And according to them, for, take it or leave it, it's reached thousands of kids. So I feel pretty good about that. We've also put some videos on YouTube, and those have gotten, I believe, over 2 million hits. And so, it's hard to judge the impact of work, whether it be citations or, new companies or whatever, but definitely feel good about this, that hopefully there's somewhere, some kid that has attended one of these that has decided to go into engineering. We continue to work on this. In fact, Adam, who's one of the students in the audience, has done some really amazing things. I've been dying to show this off. This is a printed circuit board material, and you can see there's an LED light in the middle of this, this material, and it's your watch during this video, which I'll go ahead and play it. He uses a laser, so he puts this thing in the laser, and it uses one setting to cut the material, and then he comes back with a different setting with the same laser, doesn't have to move it, and gets it to fold. So there's more cuts, and there's more folds, and throughout this, the LED continues to work based on the way that we Adam designed it. I deserve no credit here. And this is with some friends Nathan Lazarus at the Army Research Lab. Okay, so now you need to go back in time, back when I started at NC State, and I was also thinking, what did I want to do? And I had another great mentor, Professor George Whitesides, where I did my postdoc, and he got me very excited about soft materials. Soft materials, as the name implied, are just materials that are soft and squishy. And well, why would you want to do this? Well, most devices, including this laptop, your cell phone, that robotic hand, are made out of rigid materials. But our bodies are made mostly out of soft materials, like our tissue. And so we want to be able to make something that can either be worn against the body, be implanted in the body, interact safely with the body. And one inspiration for this is octopus. You have to watch this video a little bit carefully. Believe it or not, you're looking at an octopus, and it will become apparent in a second. This is some video taken by Roger Hamlin out in California. And the octopus has kind of distorted its body and changed its color. It's absolutely amazing. And now that you've seen this, we cannot do anything close to this. So nature, once again, humbles us. But while I was in the Whitesides group, there was this work on soft robotics. They're basically made out of pieces of rubber and pneumatic chambers that get blown up, and they can kind of crawl and grip and do all this kind of stuff. So we're thinking, okay, there's going to be these soft, squishy things in the future. How do we introduce functionality into these things? Well, functionality in this case means electronics. And and if you want to make something soft, how do you do it? Well, liquids are very, very soft, and what we have here is a plot of the modulus, basically how hard materials are. And diamond is very, very hard, but if you go about 1 million times softer, you get into the world of like rubber, elastomers, PDMS. If you go 1,000 times softer, you get into the world of biology. You see that there's a nice little range there, depending on how often you go to the gym. But anyway, if you go all the way to the left, you'll see liquid metals. And unfortunately, when people think of the word liquid metal, they think of two things, both of which are negative. And so it's been my personal crusade to change that, and I'll try to convince you. So the reason they think of negative things, they typically think of Terminator 2. So if you haven't seen the movie, this is the former governor of California, who has just blown up the bad guy. And the bad guy is this creepy material that turns into this liquid metal and reassembles. And I like to show this because clearly you're looking at science fiction, but because liquids don't take on this kind of shape, but it does inspire what we want to do. We don't want to make a villain, but we want to be able to control the shape of metals and make them very, very soft. I had the good fortune also of talking to the guy who did the special effects for this. His name's Gene Warren Jr., He actually passed away about a year ago, but he won the Academy Award for this work, and sure enough, he used mercury to do the rendering in this movie. So mercury, Terminator, kind of negative. Now let's try to flip the script here. So how do you pick a liquid metal? Well, there's mercury, but that's toxic, so we don't want that. There's these elements that are on the left-hand side of the periodic table, but you'll remember that those are explosive and radioactive, so we don't want to use those. So it's really about process of elimination that leaves gallium. And some of you may have never heard of gallium, but you'll notice one thing, and that is it's right below aluminum. And that means they are like brothers. If they're in the same column of the periodic table, they're like brothers and sisters. That means they have similar properties. But there's one big difference that's important, and that is that gallium melts at near room temperature. So this is a crystal of gallium, and if you don't think in terms of Celsius, this is about 86 Fahrenheit, which means if you held it in your hand, it would turn into a liquid. But we want it to be a liquid at all times, so we add an indium, and this is a bit like putting salt on the road when it snows. You mix these two things together, and it depresses the melting point until you get truly a liquid. I'm very biased, but I think this is the most interesting material on the periodic table. It has no vapor pressure, which means you don't have to worry about it evaporating or breathing it. It's got low toxicity, so you don't have the same concerns of mercury. The viscosity is like water, so the way it flows is like water. But to us, the most important thing is that it reacts with air. And when it reacts with air, it forms a very thin layer of oxide. That's kind of a fancy word for rust. Normally you don't want rust, but this rust is so thin that it turns out not to be detrimental. So let me prove to you that there's a solid layer of basically glass on the surface. So this is what it looks like spread out on a glass slide. And you can take a little bit of acid with a Q-tip and dissolve away that layer of glass that we call it oxide. When you do that, the metal beads up. And this is exactly what you would expect. If you ever spilled like a mercury thermometer, you know it forms a bunch of beads. And this does exactly the same thing, but only when you remove this oxide layer. Okay, so what do we know about this oxide layer? It's only a few nanometers thick. To give you perspective on what that means in terms of size, imagine plucking off one of your hairs. That's 100 microns. Now you'd have to divide that by about 1,000 or 3,000 or something like that to get down to the thickness of this layer. So it's only a few atoms thick, but it's important because it has a big effect on the way this stuff behaves. Now this is not really all that surprising because actually, believe it or not, the aluminum foil that you have in your house also has this, because remember it's a brother with gallium. And this is really important because if aluminum didn't form this, aluminum is actually explosive. Did you know that? You had explosive materials in your kitchen and you probably cook with them. So this layer, we call it passivating because it's like a shield. The oxygen's over here, the metal's over here, and it protects it. Well, normally when you want to make an electronics, you don't really want an oxide because they're insulators. But in our case, the oxide's very, very useful. So let me show you why. It allows us to shape the metal into shapes that would normally not be allowed by surface tension. So this was work done by an undergrad, actually, and here you'll see we'll take droplets and dispense them from a nozzle, and they oxidize so fast that you can actually start stacking them like snowmen. Now remember, without the oxide, it would just form one big puddle, right? And so this whole principle is enabled by this oxide layer that's just forming basically instantly and is very, very thin. So one thing you can do is stack droplets, and this is interesting because for the first time, at least I think the first time in history, you can print metals at room temperature with no additional processing. You can also do a burst of pressure. It oxidizes so fast, it will form a fiber, kind of like Spider-Man. And that's like a garden hose. You can drag it around because liquid on the inside, and it's electrically conductive. And then this is as close as we get to biology in our lab. This is a dead bug. I don't know if you can see the eyes. So I go to conferences and people say, oh, you're the dead bug guy. It's not a good reputation. Anyway, so my student did this as a joke, but I really like this because it shows how gentle this process is and how small these structures are. So they're about the size of a human hair. So that's interesting because you can actually pattern metals in new ways, and metals are useful for a bunch of things. You can also inject metal. So here, these are we call microchannels. It's just a fancy word for a tube. And we inject, just apply a little bit of pressure with our thumb. That breaks the oxide layer, and the metal flows in, pops up on the other side. Oxide forms and holds it in that shape. And so just like that, guess what we just formed? An antenna. An antenna is just a conductor, like a piece of metal that's in a certain shape. And we've made it inside of something that's a piece of rubber. So we're able to make antennas that are soft and flexible. So let me tell you a brag/embarrassing story. So this was my very first paper And poor Jan Ginzer, I think I asked him to read my paper like 3 times because I was so nervous about submitting it. And it was accepted, and it was, very joyous. And what made it even more joyous was some news outlets picked up on it because I think it was kind of captivating and new. And it got featured in the NBC and The Economist and MIT Technology Review, a bunch of places. And I always tell my students, some of them are here, so they're going to be mad at me. I always tell them, take good pictures the first time so that you have it, and then you have it forever and ever. Well, the embarrassing part is I wish I had trimmed my fingernails, and I'm going to go to the next slide. So, yeah, so a lot of the world has seen my hand. Okay, there's other ways to pattern the metal. So previously we injected, there was like an inlet and an outlet, and you pump the metal in and air comes out the other side. Well, this is some work where we just had an inlet, and in that inlet we placed a droplet of liquid metal on the top. So it's a little bit like an ice cream cone. You put a droplet of the metal right over the entrance to that little hole, and we put the whole thing in a vacuum chamber, which you can't see, but just imagine it. So it's under vacuum, and that actually pulls the air out of these microchannels. And if you watch carefully, there's my student, and he's going to come up and turn the valve. Actually, this is a co-advised student with Jan. And when he turns the valve, the air is going to come back into the chamber, and that applies atmospheric pressure to the metal. And the channels are still under vacuum, so that basically, it kind of looks like magic, but it basically is pushing the metal into these microchannels. So it's kind of a hands-free way to pattern these metals. So that's also really cool because this makes it a little bit more manufacturable. All right, so we can pattern the metal, but what is it good for? Well, it's a liquid, so it's very soft, and if you inject this into a piece of rubber, you can make really stretchy wires. And there's a little sound here. I don't know if this will work. Oh, there is. So I know my NC State friends will recognize this. I played this all over the world, but not everybody knows it. So we anticipated critics, so we cut off one of the earphones, and we let all the sound come out of the stretchy one. And you can see that you can stretch this, and basically you get the best of both worlds, the stretchability of a piece of rubber, but the conductivity of a metal. Well, this caught the eye of some places that you would know, like Microsoft, and they were very nice to invite me to do a sabbatical, and this was a really special time for my family, so I'm grateful to Microsoft. So I spent a little less than a year out there, and I'm also thankful to Peter and Louis and the university for allowing me to take that time. While I was there, this is a little bit of storytelling for name dropping, but there was a rumor that Bill Gates was going to come through the lab, and I really wanted to show him these stretchy wires, and that part is true. And I was worried though because the materials that we were using because they were convenient, but they didn't have the best mechanical properties. In fact, if you wanted to become like Hulk Hogan, you could rip these things apart. So that got me started thinking, well, how can we address this? So one thing I did also on my sabbatical, which was at Duke, so we helped them earlier, they paid us back. I worked with this student, Meredith Barbie, who actually has ties to NC State. She's now going to be an assistant professor at UT Chattanooga, and she deserves all the credit for this. But anyway, the idea is we made one of these liquid metal wires, and we put it in a silicone, just so, kind of like bathroom caulk in a way. And we put these special molecules, which I won't go into a lot of detail, but you'll notice there's these ring structures. And if you imagine, if you pull on a ring, when it eventually reaches its breaking point, it will open. And that opening causes a change in color. So here we go, we'll start stretching this. And I'm thinking, right now, like Bill Gates, please stop, please stop. And it's about to break, oh my gosh. And right before it's about to break, it changes color. And it warns you of impending failure. Now later, somebody pointed out to me that this might actually encourage people to stretch it to the point of breaking to see the color. But anyway, I thought it was kind of cute that it turns a purple color, which is a nice combination of NC State and Duke. All right, so that doesn't quite solve the problem, but it was a step in the right direction. We also made wires that were in a special polymer, and this is a very simple circuit. So there's liquid metal here that's in this brown polymer, and the electricity is going through it to light up this LED. We take a pair of scissors, cut this thing in half, and in doing so, we break the circuit, of course. But the key idea, which is a little hard to see because it's dark, but the metal doesn't come squirting out. And in fact, it forms that oxide layer so fast that it stays flush with the interface, kind of like when you get a scab when you cut your skin. So when you bring this back together, the metal will go back together. And if you wait a few minutes, the polymer actually goes back together. And the way it does it is by using what's called hydrogen bonds. Hydrogen bonds are what hold water together. Water is a liquid, so you think, well, why isn't this a liquid? Well, it's because these molecules have multiple hydrogen bonds, and that makes it allow it to be strong enough to be cohesive, which just means kind of solid-like. So you can come back 10 minutes later, you don't have to do anything, the molecules do it themselves, and now it's gone back together. Okay, so more recent work, very excited about. Another approach to this is, why don't we just make tougher materials? And the idea of a tough material can be kind of explained fairly easily. So this is a plot, and I promise not to show too many plots, but this is a plot of force versus strain, which is how far you stretch something. And if you have a rubbery material like a rubber band, it will follow this blue line, which means you can stretch it really far, but it doesn't require very much force. If you have a brittle material, like glass, for example, it's really difficult to, you have to apply a lot of force to break it, but it doesn't stretch very far, it will fracture. So that's called brittle. If you want a tough material, you want to go to high force to high strain. And actually, it's the area under there that is the energy that gets dissipated. Well, we're doing this with gels, and gels kind of is a fancy sounding word, but hydrogels, as the name implies, hydro meaning water, are gels swollen with water. And every one of you has experienced them. They're things like contact lenses, Jell-O, baby diapers. Gels are kind of all around us. But they have a few problems. One is that water evaporates from these gels, so that's not very good if you want to make a device. But also, as you know from contact lenses, they tend to tear very easily. So I have an amazing student who came up with this idea, so I literally deserve no credit. But she said, well, what if we get rid of the water and replace it with these special liquids called ionic liquids that are very exciting. So an ionic liquid, you've probably heard of ions. Well, sodium chloride, like table salt, forms ions when you dissolve it into water. But it's a solid, right? You have to dissolve it into the water. An ionic liquid is a material that's a liquid all the time at room temperature. So this is a picture of a flask with this ionic liquid, and basically it has trouble crystallizing, so it can't form a solid. Okay, I'm not going to really go into much depth. I'm just going to show you the highlight reel here. But we start with an ionogel made of polyacrylamide. This is a material found in contact lenses, and you can see it's very brittle, just breaks. This is an ionogel made with acrylic acid. This is baby diaper material, the part that absorbs the liquid, and it's very soft and stretchy, but not very strong. This is a copolymer, so kind of a mixture of the two with hydrogel, and it's also soft and stretchy, but it breaks. This is the exact same material, but an ionic liquid, and it's super strong. So all we did was change the liquid. That's it. Otherwise, we're using baby diaper material. And so how does this work? Well, you need to remember your children's stories, the story of Goldilocks. So Goldilocks, you know, it's got the soup, one's too hot, one's too cold, one's just right. So over here, if we have just acrylamide, it's brittle. And you actually see it looks white. That's because it's called phase separation. Basically, it's like salad dressing. The polymer doesn't go into the liquid very well, so it looks white, kind of like milk. And over here, it's too stretchy. This is really soft and not so good. But if you're right at the border between where that happens, that's the just right. That's where you want to be. And so I haven't forgotten my basic math here. I said 1 + 1 = 10. This is to be a little bit provocative. Oh, by the way, there's other work that's in this space that's really good and actually inspired this. So I don't want to pretend that we were the first, but these materials actually have very remarkable properties, so I wanted to share them. Okay, so what does 1 + 1 = 10 mean? Well, remember the stretchy materials? They go to really high strain, but don't require much force. So that's one of our materials. That's the baby diaper material. Then the other material, acrylamide, is this red one, and you can barely see it. It goes up a little bit, and then it breaks. But so that's 1 + 1, you mix them together, you get this blue graph. So it's really stretchy, and it's really difficult to stretch it, so it dissipates a lot of energy. Okay, don't believe me, don't like graphs? Okay, let me prove it to you with a video. Here's our hydrogel, kind of our baby diaper material. We made a drum, like a membrane, and we dropped a ball, and it just tears right through it, right? Kind of boring. Now, if you use the ionogel material, exact same polymer, but just different liquid, it bounces off of it, and it's quite tough. So what's exciting about this is this material is as tough as cartilage, which is found in your body, and a lot of people have been striving to make materials that are tough as cartilage, and this does it. It also, in some aspects, is as good as natural rubber, which was a big deal during World War II. People were fighting over making natural rubber because it's really difficult to make it synthetically. So this has some really interesting properties. All right, home stretch. The coda, which means the end. One more little story. So grew up a big Star Wars fan. I know my friend Ian is too, and my daughters. So what the heck do I mean by use the force? Well, here the force is surface tension. And unfortunately, surface tension is a little bit hard for humans to understand because, well, it doesn't really become significant until things get really small. But if you're a little bug like this, you can actually sit on the top of water due to surface tension. Now, I'm going to show you some numbers, and I don't really care about the units, but just remember the numbers. Water, which is very polar, it's got these hydrogen bonds that I talked about, it has a very large surface tension, about 70. So 70. Most other liquids you encounter in your day-to-day life, like gasoline, are like 20 or 30. So that's the typical range that you experience in your day-to-day life. Liquid metals are about 700. So imagine the difference between going up 10 flights of stairs versus 100 flights of stairs. It's a big difference, right? It's an order of magnitude. And to prove it to you, this is a vial it's in a base, so it doesn't have the oxide layer. And you can see you can break these droplets, the metal up into little droplets, but it immediately goes back together because it wants to minimize its surface energy, which it does by forming a sphere. Well, we can trick the metal into going into this state by using electrochemistry. Literally, you just take the metal, you put it in some salt water, which is called electrolyte, and you stick two electrodes in connected to a battery, and that will remove that oxide layer. So instead of using acid or base, here we're using electricity. So that's kind of cool. You can turn on this behavior. And so we decided to show off a little bit, and we made a maze out of liquid metal, and we put water at one end and a blob of metal at the other, and we apply a voltage, and that allows the oxide layer to be removed from the leading edge of the metal. And so you're effectively solving the maze. And the reason it's kind of a trick, basically the electrical path is the solution, and it just follows that electrical path because we're removing the oxide along that path. Now, the physics of this are actually pretty obvious because the metal simply wants to beat up, so it's trying to flow to where it can beat up like a ball. The real challenge is how the heck do you get it to go back in? And naively, you might think, or I might think, you take the red and black electrodes and just swap them. But if you do that, instead of removing the oxide, you would actually deposit it. And that's not that interesting. You're just putting kind of gunk on the surface. So you can imagine how surprised we were when we did this. We took a droplet of the metal, and oh, by the way, this is in base, so there's actually no oxide on it when it starts the experiment. And we applied a voltage, and what we were expecting to see was nothing, just something form on the surface, but instead, it spread like a pancake. And there's a bunch of weird things here. It formed this little stem that's, liquids don't do that. This is the highest surface tension liquid, so it really shouldn't form a puddle. There's so many weird things. And that was from the side. This is looking from the top. So here, gravity is squishing the metal into these molds, so they look like triangles and stars and other cool looking shapes. But when you turn the electricity off, the oxide goes away and it beats back up. So you can completely kind of like, turn this behavior on and off. And it's a long story, and actually Karen Daniels and I are working on this together for years now, trying to understand this. It's not easy, but this is kind of the hand-waving explanation. If you want to lower the surface tension of something, typically what you do is use a surfactant. And a surfactant is just soap. It's a fancy word for soap. Surfactant stands for surface active agent, just soap. So for example, when you go to wash your hands, hopefully you wash your hands a lot these days, there's oil on your hands, and it doesn't want to dissolve into the water that's coming out of the sink. The soap helps those two things be compatible. And so, as you know, it's very easy to put soap into the water, but how the heck do you get it back out? It's possible, but it's not easy. And in our case, we apply 1 volt, we deposit whatever this surfactant is, and then negative 1 volt, it goes away, and the metal beads up. So completely reversible. And the neatest part is that we've gotten this to be the largest change in surface tension ever reported. And it's not even close. So the way you can tell this is that the shape of a droplet represents a balance of gravity. So gravity wants something to be flat, right? And surface tension, which wants it to be a sphere. So in these experiments, we put a little electrode underneath it, and when you apply the voltage, when the surface tension gets lower, it will start spreading. Now, at very special conditions, we find something that's absolutely amazing, and that is it behaves as if the surface tension was 0. If the surface tension of a liquid is 0, it should just keep spreading and spreading and spreading. So the way we did this with Karen is we made a little swimming pool. It's about this big. It's like more like a petri dish. And we attached an electrode to this little droplet, and we apply the voltage, and we look from the top down. And so this is what it looks like. And so here it goes. It's spreading like a pancake. But not only is it just spreading and spreading, but it's actually forming fractals. Now, you know that snowflakes form fractals, but as soon as they melt in your hand, they go back to forming a droplet. This is exactly the opposite. We're starting with a droplet, and it's forming fractals. So this is the liquid the largest surface tension known to man, and we're making it into a fractal at a less than 1 volt. So it's very, very interesting. Now, if you didn't quite appreciate this, let me say it in one more way. This is a bar chart of the surface tension of these fluids. So here's poor little water, only 70. Remember that number 70? And if you want to lower the surface tension of water, you can put soap in it. So it goes down to about 30. And we feel pretty good about that. That's the basis for shampoo and washing our hands, and that's good, 70 to 30. Well, here's liquid metal, and it's like 600, 700, depends on the environment. Well, the problem is most people don't think in these units. So let me keep these numbers the same and instead cross it out and put pounds. Okay, so water is like a medium-sized dog that's sitting on your lap. And when you put soap on it, it becomes a smaller dog. And that's fine, it's very effective. In our case, we have a polar bear, and when we apply 1 volt, we get a feather. And we can go back and forth between them. Okay, so we go from like 600 pounds to basically 0 pounds. Wouldn't that be a nice diet? Actually, 0 would be bad, but close to 0 we could live with. All right, so what can we do with this? Well, if you've ever had a drippy faucet, you know about Rayleigh instabilities. These are named after Lord Rayleigh. They've been known since the late 1800s, and they've been studied with every kind of fluid and studied this way and that way, and they always come to the same conclusion. If you pump a liquid out of a nozzle, it always breaks into droplets. And you know this if you've ever turned on a hose. You can form a cylinder, but it will always break up into droplets. So one little equation, just to show I am an engineer. The time for these streams, so imagine a stream of water coming out, the time for it to break up is proportional to the diameter. So the smaller you make your little hose, the faster it's going to break up, the less time it needs. And the bigger the surface tension, the less time it needs. So if you want to make this happen, you make it small and you make it high surface tension. So that's exactly what we did. We took a nozzle that's the size of a human hair, so it's 100 microns, and we pumped the metal, which has the largest surface tension known to man. So here it goes, and of course it forms a drippy faucet. But we started applying a voltage in this electrolyte, and the droplets get smaller, which means the tension is going down, and it goes down more and more and more until no more drippy faucet. It forms a wire. And actually, it's kind of interesting. We haven't studied this part, but if you go too high in the voltage, it gets kind of crusty and it looks like a candle. So this is for a future grant with Karen. Okay, well, we thought, okay, well, it just didn't have enough time to break up into droplets, because I know if I turn on my garden hose, it will form a cylinder, but it will still break up. So we found the tallest container in our lab, and I don't know if you know the Disney show Rapunzel, but Rapunzel, let down your hair is what it usually says. Well, here we're going to let down the liquid metal. So here's our nozzle, and we're going to pump this metal. And so you really have to almost need glasses to see this, but this thing is the wire. So let's see if this works. So here it goes. I'll try to point to it. So it's right there. And it just keeps going down, and it's not breaking up. So this is the liquid. It's hard to see. This is the liquid with the largest surface tension known to man, and we've made a wire at it at room temperature. Okay. Well, we were having a lot of fun with this until one night when I was watching late night television, and I learned the following.
This is really cool. This week, scientists at North Carolina State University announced they discovered a way to move and manipulate liquid metal with electricity. And Arnold Schwarzenegger has already been sent back in time to stop it.
So anyway, that kind of changed our research direction. So I will wrap up before Arnold gets here. So hopefully I've shown you, this idea of liquid metals beyond the terminator. So not just mercury, not just terminator, but gallium, and it forms this oxide layer that really allows us to do a bunch of interesting things. I gave you a sneak peek at these ionogels that have remarkable toughness, and the last thing I showed you is with electrical control of interfacial tension over really unprecedented range and completely reversible. So I've managed to stay on time, and I think there's time for questions, just no hard ones, please. Thank you. Thank you, John. Okay, so first of all, gallium has been shown to be non-toxic. I'm always a little careful when I speak in public because I think it really needs to be studied a little bit more before people claim that, because gallium is actually not found in the human diet, in your body or in your diet. However, the body treats it similar to iron. Iron and gallium are similar oxidation state and similar ionic radius, so similar size. And so if you get gallium in your body, basically your body has the capability to remove it, and that's been shown. So gallium, so another kind of comment, gallium has no vapor pressure. So if it's sitting right here, I'm not worried about it. I'm not going to breathe it. The only way I get it, and this is my reason to worry, because it is a liquid, it's like wet paint. It's a little bit easier to get it into your body. But when you take a vitamin in the morning, right, and it says I'm getting magnesium and zinc and all these things, you're not actually eating the metal. You're eating the salt of that metal. And so no metals, as far as I know, are soluble in the body. They have to be salts. And as a salt, the gallium has been FDA approved for a number of applications. So for example, it's used as an MRI contrast agent. Actually, it's not used because there's better ones, but it was FDA approved for that purpose. So I'm personally never, I would not probably eat it, but I'm never worried about handling it. But there are compounds made out of gallium that are toxic, but the same thing's for mercury. I don't think mercury and metal is all that toxic, but I think it's the other stuff it forms. In terms of the other metals, there's bismuth, which is in Pepto-Bismol. That's why I call it Bismol. It's got bismuth, and it's antibacterial, and so that's another one that's got a low melting point. Tin is another one. Indium, but indium's not as good for you as well, gallium's not good for you, but indium I'd be a little bit more careful about. But those all have higher melting points. But the good news is, your body is warm enough to melt gallium. So in some ways, you don't really need to use other ones for a lot of applications. We actually have a paper on drug delivery using liquid metal particles. So we went through the whole trouble of putting it, into mice, and they were fine. I think I saw someone else's hand. Uh-oh, my brother. My friends were asking about that too. Yeah, this was a fun story. So after that, the paper, the thing I showed you at the end where we lowered the surface tension and the metal kind of was wiggling around, I got an email kind of in broken English, in Spanish, kind of somebody whose native language was Spanish, and they asked me if they could use their video because they had a television station in South America that I didn't know, but apparently it was a big deal. And they said, can we use your video? And I said, yes, of course. And I said, no, we want to, we want you to explain the video. So I said, okay, so I wrote this long, very plain English explanation. They said, no, we want you to come here and explain the video. And it's like, well, where is here? I said, oh, we record in Madrid. Sorry, Ian. And I was like, well, I've got family obligations. See, Kim, I did turn down travel. Family obligations, teaching obligations. Louis, take note. So I was like, I probably shouldn't go to Madrid. But the student really did the work. They should be the one that goes. So, okay, got the student talking to them. And they said, well, we're really sorry. We're going to move the shoot to London. And they're like, okay, why is that? I said, well, Nicole Kidman's going to be on the show. I was like, what? It's like, family schmamly, sorry. Teaching, smeeching. But no, so my student went, and it was a big ordeal because we shipped liquid metal and it got caught up in customs, you can imagine. And so we had to call friends at Oxford to get liquid metal. And anyway, so he's on the show, and I wish I put the video in here, but he's on the show, and Nicole Kidman is standing behind him, and he wrote Nicole with liquid metal, and she looks very scared because there's chemicals. So she's like, it's like that. And she's getting everything on delay too because of the translation through her earpiece. But anyway, so when my student defended his thesis defense, he said, I'd like to thank my advisor for the date with Nikki. And I think everybody but me thought it was Photoshop, but it was real. So that was a missed opportunity for me. Other questions? That's my only good story. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. It really means a lot to me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Louis.